Have you ever worked in a job that you didn't like? Or maybe this is your current reality. And how many times have you dreamt of leaving the job, but you still remain? Or you just think or dream up scenarios where you change positions? Well, in this episode, I wish to share some of the stories that have inspired me to create and produce this podcast. And I want to do you the favor of offering a few recommendations so that you can meditate about your professional character and motivate yourself to make any changes. Dear ProFAITHsional, welcome. This is a podcast where I share some of God's favor over your work life while I offer you a professional favor. Although faith without works is dead, sometimes we do our job and work without faith. So my wish is to inspire, motivate, and encourage us to grow our faith in the midst of our job and work environment. Thanks for listening. So let me offer a little bit of context to start off. By January 2017, I had launched a consulting agency called Media Purpose. And the idea behind it was to offer consulting for digital marketing and management for small businesses as well as nonprofits and potentially churches. And so, but right around that time, my mom, who she is the owner, president, really the administrator of a childcare center, was going through some staff transitions. And at that time, because I had already, launched myself as a consultant, I thought, well, I could do this for mom, right? So at the end, mom became my client. And now it's been 3 years of growth and stretching in ways I didn't even think possible. And so I've met some very interesting people, worked with some very challenging characters. And so that brings me to the top 4 employees that I've encountered while working at a childcare center. And then the first one, I'll start off, I'm going to be calling Diana. Now, I must say that I've changed everybody's name just so that, to safeguard their identity and then also just to keep it confidential. But anyway, so now about Diana. We met her through her sister. Her sister had came to our center looking for childcare for two little young girls. And so at that time, Diana, she came and she toured. She saw everything. She was kind of the second pair of eyes to her sister, really, and just kind of the second opinion. So after her sister's children had started in our center, a few days went by, and then Diana would come in with sister, pick up and drop off the children. And then after a few days, Diana approaches me and she goes, "Are you guys hiring?" And I'm like, "Well, yes, and maybe." "Who are you asking for?" And she goes, "Well, I've been in here now for a few days and I just really like the environment. I really like your vibe and I really just like the overall center and how you guys just manage everything. So I'm looking for something, and if you're hiring, I would love to work with you guys." And at that point I said, "Yes, why don't we just set up an interview?" And so, she applied and she went through all the formalities. So by the time she came and had the interview with us, we just wanted to know a little bit more about her and really what was her current situation at that time and how come she was looking for something and that sort of stuff. So some of the things that she said in the interview were she said that she was living with her boyfriend and that the two of them were doing relatively okay financially. So she wasn't really looking for something that would necessarily pay tons of money, and that, she was just considering more having something that would keep her occupied and something that she enjoyed, kind of like a hobby. So at that point, I was excited because, finding people that are not necessarily just working for money is great news. Money is not the best of motivators, and especially for us working in a childcare center at that time, we thought, you know what, when a child is screaming and they are trying to throw things at you, all the money in the world cannot make up for temper tantrums, especially when they're not your own children. So we thought that was a positive thing. So we go, that's great. She also said that she had never worked in childcare, and we were okay with that because we think that everybody has to start somewhere. So we don't mind trying out someone and maybe training them up. That was our idea. So, after getting to know her, she started working with us. And so right away, some of the things that we noticed were that she was a very sort of very calm presence with amongst the children, which is great. As an adult, that's the that's the best thing, because the adult is the one that is tasked with just setting the tone, calming everybody down, and just keeping everything in harmony. So she had that, and she demonstrated that she was friendly. She had a great tone when speaking to the children. Even a therapist who comes and consults for us, she praised her for the way that she communicated with the children. So all around, she had awesome positive characteristics as an employee. However, shortly after working with us, she started showing other tendencies. For example, one day she just all of a sudden does not show up to work, and we don't know anything from her. We don't get a voicemail, we don't get a phone call, we don't get any texts, any emails, no communication. And so she had been up until that point very punctual and showed to be responsible. And so by the time I got around to it in the afternoon, I sit down, clear my head, and send her a message. And I ask, hey, are you okay? We miss you today. I just want to know what's going on. And so she apologizes and she says, oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't feeling very well. Took some medicine, completely didn't missed my alarm, and I've just been resting. And I said, okay, well, I hope you feel better, and we hope to see you on Monday, because that was a Friday. Then so that when we made it past that incident. Then another time, shortly after, she shows to work on a Monday and she has a black eye. And at that moment, we were a little surprised because right underneath her eye, she had some stitches. And so she said, hey, I got in a car accident on Sunday. And so, an object just pretty much just hit my face. And then that's what kind of caused this situation. And if you're okay with it, I'm happy to work today. And we said, as long as you're not in any pain and you're okay, and, the doctor didn't say otherwise, then yes, you can work. I must say that we didn't 100% believe it, because so my mom has a nursing background, and so it was apparent to her that the stitches around her eye, they didn't look like they were from the day before, because it looked like they were already starting to heal. So that was a little questionable. But you know what? We made it past that incident. Then another time, again, she is a no-show, no text, no call, no voicemail, no warning signs whatsoever. And then I reach out and I say, hey, are you okay? What's going on? And at that moment, she said, oh, I'm having a panic attack, and my heart has been like racing the whole day, and I wasn't sure what to do, and I just didn't feel good to be at work. And I said, well, I hope you feel better and take care of yourself, and we'll see you the next day. So at that moment, we had already kind of three little, warning signs, you can sort of call them. And so then we shortly after, it just started to become, it just seemed like it was becoming a tendency. She would be late more often than not. And every time she would come in, she would just offer an apology. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And to me, it was like the cheapest of apologies. And the reason I say that is because the best apology or true repentance is demonstrated with change. The fact that she continued to exhibit the same behavior was really letting me know that, she's really not meaning this, right? And I know you're probably thinking, well, like, why didn't you just let her go? Which is a valid question. However, to hire someone, it's especially in childcare, there's a long process. So our thought was, while we find someone that can be a good fit, we need to just see how we can manage this situation. Now, the last sort of incident we had with her, she's a no-show. and no communication. So we don't know from her. At this point, I'm already kind of fed up, and so I don't message her. I care to know she's okay, but I don't care to ask her. And so I kind of just let it go by, let the day just kind of run its course. And then the next day, I get a phone call from her in the morning, and she's telling me that, oh, well, I'm so sorry about missing work yesterday. I know that we've talked about this, but when I was trying to leave home, I someone tried to snatch me. Yes, that's exactly what she said. Someone tried to snatch her. And because then she panicked and she didn't know what to do, she just thought that she would just stay home. She didn't want to go out until they kind of figured out what happened. And so she was assuring me that that day she was going to show up to work, but she didn't know what time. And that was because she was going to wait till the property manager arrives so that they can go through the cameras, and so that they could maybe talk to the police and try and figure out what might have happened, or who the person that had done this. And so I said, well, I hope, take care of yourself. We'll see you here when you get here. Needless to say, the rest of the day she didn't show. And quite honestly, that was the last we heard from her. Now, she worked with us a total of 6 months. So in the span of 6 months, um, all these little incidents just kind of trickled and happened. I have to admit that I jokingly, and it was an internal joke, I would call her the star. She was our star employee. And not because she was like the top performer, but more so because I just looked forward to what was her next excuse. To me, she was the most creative person at coming up with excuses for not showing up to work. And so, as an employer, while it was not pleasant, I must say that it was just funny, kind of like a haha kind of funny. So that is my first employee, Diana, within my top four. Which brings me to the second employee, rounding out the top three spot. So I'm going to go ahead and call her Martha. And this is her story. See if you can keep up. We met her at the interview, and some of the things she told us is that she at that time, a 2-year-old son, and she was struggling to find a job because she didn't have anybody to care for him while she worked. She had been living with her in-laws, but after the father of the baby passed away, she sort of had to go and move back in with her mom. And so her mom worked full time, and there were no other relatives to watch over the child. So we said, well, you're looking for a job. We're a child care center, and we need to hire someone. So maybe we can make this a win-win. And so she didn't have a car. And because of this, she needed to rely on someone picking her up and dropping her off at work. And so we needed to kind of work with her schedule, her transportation schedule. And we agreed. So we went ahead, and after a couple of days of getting everything set up, she starts. The very first week, she comes in and she works on Monday. And it was an interesting day, as was expected. Her son was very attached to her. So that created some kind of uncomfortable situations, just because he was jealous, because she would be trying to care for other children, and then he will have some really terrible tantrums. But we made it past the first day. The second day she comes in, not much different, and we're thinking, okay, it's the first week. Hopefully this gets better. Then Wednesday, I get a voicemail from her very early in the morning, and she's saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I won't be able to make it to work today. My son is sick, and I know that we cannot come in." And I said, "Okay, well, I hope they feel better." Then Thursday comes around, and I get another voicemail from her. And remember, first week, Thursday. And the voicemail says, "Oh, we're still sick, cannot come into work today. And so I hope to see you tomorrow." So, alrighty. We don't see her Thursday. Then Friday comes around, and again, I have another voicemail. "Oh, we're sick. We can't make it to work." At this point, I'm a little irritated because she's only worked 2 days out of the week. And so her first week. So we go, hopefully we'll see her next week. The second week comes around, and we finally see her on Monday. She comes in, and we have a normal day. And so, as was expected, child is still manifesting himself. And so, but we make it through. Then Tuesday, she comes in, and right around noon or so, she tells me, "Oh, my eyes are really burning. My son had pink eye over the weekend while we weren't here, and so I'm afraid that if I have it, maybe I should be going home." And I go, "Well, it's noon, and your time to get off is at 3, so see how much you can push through." And I know you're probably thinking, I know if she really had some sort of infection in her eye, it's contagious. But come on, she had only worked like 2 days out of like a week and a half. And so we said push through and see how you make it. So around maybe 2 or so, we said, you know what, I think we got it. We can take it from here. You can go home and hope you feel better. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Wednesday comes around, and I have a voicemail from her. And the voicemail's, "Oh, well, we're not feeling very good. We cannot make it in today." And I said, "Okay." At this point, we're just thinking we need to start obviously looking for somebody else to replace her. And so then Thursday comes around, and I have yet another voicemail early in the morning saying, "Oh, I'm not feeling very well. Can't make it in today." And I go, "Okay, definitely by this point, she needs to go. I'm like, I've reached my limit." And then the interesting thing was that Friday came around, and I get a voicemail from her mom early in the morning, and her mom is saying, "Oh, well, Martha cannot come into work today because, we think she has the flu. She has to go to the emergency room, and she won't be able to make it." And at that point, I said she's officially fired, just because we need people that are reliable and can actually show up to work. So I decide to, in the morning, write her a email just to make it official and say, "Hey, it is unfortunate what's happened with you and your son. I hope you guys are doing well. Unfortunately, I don't believe we'll be able to continue to work together, because we really do need people that are here when they're expected to be here. So we wish you all the best. And for the couple of hours that you work, there'll be a paycheck waiting for you. Just pick it up sometime between 9 to 5. Well, that Friday, I stayed in the office and I was working on something. And so right around 6, she comes into the office, and then I see her, and I was a little surprised because she had a mild black eye. And right when I see her, I said, "Hey, are you okay?" And she goes, "Oh, well, I'm sorry for not having been here, but I was incarcerated overnight." And yeah, dramatic pause. Because I don't know what you're thinking right now, but this is crazy, right? So then she continues and she goes, "Yes, I'm so sorry. I got into a fight with my boyfriend, and because he was hitting me, he was starting to, and this is not the first time it's happened. I went ahead and I stabbed him." Yeah, that's what she said. I am not making this up. And at that moment, I'm just looking at her like, "Okay." And so she says, "Well, I don't believe I'll be able to continue to work, because now I'm going to have to be in and out of the courts trying to clear this thing up. And even though he was the one that assaulted me or started the whole thing, but I was the one to have used the weapon. So now I have to make sure that I go through the formalities of the courts and try and see what I can do about clearing my record." And I go, "Well, good luck with that." At this point, I just kind of want her out, right? And so then she goes, but she has the audacity to ask, "Do you think this would maybe affect me working in any childcare in the future?" And I'm like, I'm laughing now, but at that time, luckily, I kept my composure. And so I just kind of look at her kind of poker face, and I go, "Well, you know how you had to do background check, and we had, the state has to ensure that you can work around or be around children. Well, this is considered an act of violence, so that kind of impacts that. So I don't know that you'll be able to work in childcare, at least for not anytime soon. And so I go, well, best of luck. And that's that. And at that time, I wasn't sure what to think and what to make of it all. It was surreal because never in a million years would I have thought that I would have heard anybody tell me such a story, right? And it really sounded very much made up. But I don't care to verify whether or not it was true. So that's Martha for you. Now, I was thinking, like, what if, maybe one of the things we can say is that maybe these two employees, they don't know God, they don't have a relationship with Him, maybe, they don't have any faith, they don't answer to a higher being. And so maybe finding people that have faith or that, they can appeal to working for Jesus. Maybe they will be a little bit more, I don't know, exemplary or reliable or just responsible. And after meeting the next two employees, I have to say that I question that, because just because we say we are people of faith, that doesn't say that we show our best self at work. So then this brings me to the third employee, who I'm going to call Sandra, and she rounds out the top two. When we met Sandra, again, her story was that she was going through a separation with the father of her child. She had a 3-year-old little girl. And so the situation was that now she's back living with her parents and she's trying to stand on her own 2 feet. She said that she had been extremely involved in her local church. She had been attending there for years. She was a volunteer for the Sunday school Bible classes for the children. And so she has experience dealing with a group of children, which I thought was pretty favorable. And she was the first person to have ever mentioned about or talked about being compassionate towards the children. Up until this point, my mom had been in business for roughly 5.5 years. And it was the first time that someone spoke in those terms about working with children in a childcare setting. And so we thought, wow, this is amazing. She understands what it's like, being compassionate towards the children and being understanding to them and making them feel at ease. And we tried to approach our work with the same focus. And so we thought, this is great. We're sort of in alignment in that sense. So she starts working with us on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and she was only working part-time, honestly. She said that to start off, that's really all she wanted to do. And so we said, okay, well then come on Wednesday, even though we're going to be closed Thursday and Friday. But at least that gives you a chance to just come on in, meet everybody, and just get a feel for the place and start meeting some of the people involved. Then she did a relatively okay job that day. Then she comes back on Monday and we have a normal day, nothing out of the ordinary. Tuesday, again, same thing. Wednesday, though, she completely disappears and drops off the face of the earth. And I try reaching out to her, messaging her, but I don't hear anything back. So at that moment, she disappears, she drops off, and no communication. So to this day, I don't know what happened to Sandra. So I hope that she's good. I hope that she's doing well, and that maybe she finds something she loves. But she just made such a big deal about, being committed to a community of faith and to working with the understanding of having a purpose and impact with children, that we thought that, wow, she could make a really great candidate. But I guess she turned out not to be so great. So that's Sandra. Now that takes me to the fourth employee, rounding out the top one spot. Someone that I'm going to call Pamela. So Pamela on paper was amazing. We hired her because we wanted her to be our preschool teacher. And so some of the things that we found out about her during the interview was that she never married. And so working with children just pretty much satisfied that motherly instincts for her, so she can be motherly without actually being a mom. And so we thought this is great. She was older, so I feel like she could have been that mom slash maybe grandma figure. And we thought children could really respond to that at the end of the day. And so she had worked in two different childcare centers that through churches. And so we thought that, just her being in that atmosphere of maybe a nonprofit setting and just seeing some of the, maybe interacting with some of the families, then she will have a vision about what it's like working as a teacher. I mean, she was experienced. And so I thought this was great. I mean, this was my dream come true. I can find someone that maybe was someone of faith, but then someone that also had experience, had training, had, a higher level of really preparation for working with children. And so this was great. Less for me to teach and more for me to gain from her, right? And so she starts working with us, and I have to say that her time with us coincided with Martha. Remember Martha, the black eye lady that stabbed her boyfriend? Yeah. Pamela comes to work with us right the week when Martha left us. And so when Pamela started, I said, hey, Pamela, the ideal thing is for me to just stay with you, or for one of us to really be with you, and for you to job shadow us for roughly a week, just so that you can see how we handle and do everything here in our center. Different maybe from other places you've been at. However, you're highly experienced and you've really done this before, and I have this situation to take care of, or I have another room to cover. And so I'm trusting you have the full capability to handle the group of children. And so that's that. And the first week went by, and she would tell me things like, oh, this is great. This is such a blessing. Thank you so much. I wasn't sure I was going to find something that I enjoy, or even working with people that had empathy and that understood, and just all around that are good people. And I said, oh, wow, this is awesome. Like, she gets us, and she wants to work with us. This is great. I'm a firm believer that you commit to the people before you ever commit to the job. And so I thought we may be able to develop a long working relationship with her. So then the first week goes by without a hitch. Then the second week comes around, and so she works Monday and Tuesday, just normal, regular days. Now, Wednesday, we get a surprise visit from our state inspection specialist. And this is the lady that has the full authority to shut down the place. And so she comes in and she goes about her business, inspecting the center and just making sure that we're complying with the different rules and regulations and policies. And so she comes with an assistant, and by around roughly 1 p.m., they finish the inspection. Now, it's customary for her to debrief me on her findings and her observations, so that way I will get a heads up onto what are some of the things that I'm going to have to either improve upon and respond to her report when she makes it available. And so Pamela, her schedule is working with us from 8 to 5, and then, oh no, I'm sorry, from 8 to 4, and a straight 8-hour shift, and then no break in the middle, just because while the children rest, she was designated that was her resting time as well. And so at that moment, then when my state inspector is debriefing me, I have my back to the door, and so I just finished my debrief with the from the inspection. And so shortly after after the inspector specialist leave and her assistant, then I come back and I'm looking for my mom, and I'm like, hey, we just had a visit, we have quite a few things that we're gonna have to work on. And I'm debriefing her. Before I could even finish any of my sentence, she goes, wait a minute, hold on. Pamela, I just saw her rushing to the door, and I sent our executive assistant to go after her and find her. However, our assistant comes back in and tells us by the time I got out to the parking lot, she was gone. So Pamela just got up and walked out the door right in the middle of a state inspection. And that is why she is my top and number one employee, because she was bold, but not in a good way. Um, Really, for someone to have said that she was such a person of faith and then to act in complete opposite of some of her values, I thought was pretty interesting and pretty ludicrous, honestly. And so out of all of those situations, I've told you about Diana, Martha, Sandra, Pamela. Then I'm left with thinking that obviously no two employees are alike, but they are more similar than they like to admit. And so it just left me to ponder upon the fact that, all of us can find ourselves in situations that we may not necessarily like the job, or we don't like some of the things that we're asked to do. And then what do you do in those cases? And what do you do in those situations? Now, the reality of the situation is that you're probably thinking, or you probably want to question, well, then how is it that you find these people? Or, what can you do differently as an employer? And how can we make for employers and maybe employees decide better moving forward and empower them to really put forward their most professional self at work, regardless of their worst work situation? And yes, it's as though the all the pressure is consumed by the employers, right? But there is something to be said about the employees themselves, right? How can we maybe assist someone that may find themselves kind of like Sandra or Pamela or Martha or Diana? And then how can they overcome some of those situations? And maybe how can they decide better going forward? And then that's really the idea behind ProFAITHsional favor. Those are some of the questions that I want to go ahead and answer, and maybe bring in some of my friends and some people that I've met along the journey, so that we can explore some of that. Now, I would love to say that, well, I wouldn't love to say it, but it'd be very easy for me to think, oh my gosh, this is such a unique problem to us. But the reality situation is, it's not a unique problem to us. In general, the annual total separation rates by industry, they've been on the rise. And back in 2014, they were at 40.3. That means that roughly 4 out of 10 employees would leave or change jobs, or just all around pretty much quit or move on from a company per se. But that's gone up to 44.3, a total of 4 points in 4 years. Now, that doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but there's other cases, or there's other industries where this is like a huge problem. Just in the arts, entertainment, and recreation industry, that turnover rate is at 87.4%. That means that more than 8 out of 10 employees would change jobs, or just leave a company, or just quit or abandon, or just do something kind of like maybe Martha or Diana or Pamela, right? And at the beginning of this episode, I asked the question, well, have you ever worked at a job that you disliked? Chances are you have, and chances are you are currently in a job that you don't particularly enjoy. However, how are you approaching your job on a daily basis for as long as you're there? And so I want to do us the favor of reminding us what the Bible says, how we are to approach our work and jobs. So in Colossians 3, we find a chapter that is talking to us about living the new life. How is it that we are to approach just our life in Christ? And towards the end of the chapter, we get some instructions about how specifically to go about work. And so this is what the Bible says in the Message translation of Colossians 3, verses 22 through 25. It says, servants, do what you're told by your earthly masters, right? Very first piece of instruction is just number one, servants, right? So this is speaking to people that are serving in some capacity. In another translation, the leading is slaves. Now we can say, well, that doesn't necessarily apply to us, right? We're not we're not forced into labor. It's a choice that we make. At least most of us do. But at the end of the day, we are instructed to do as we're told by our earthly masters. No one owns you. No one can claim ownership over you. However, we abide by the people that lead us, right? An earthly master is the likes of the supervisor, the manager. Think of it as the person who signs your check, the person that authorizes you to get paid on for the job that you do. That is your earthly master. And then the verse goes on to say, and don't just do the minimum that will get you by. There's this phrase that people love to throw around particularly when they're not necessarily very connected to their work environment, and it is, that's above my pay grade, right? So that means that person is saying, I'm just gonna do what's expected of me and nothing more. That's not to say that an employee cannot take advantage of an employee and ask them to do more than they should. But the attitude of the employee that says that's above my pay grade it's someone that is really settling at a low level of work, right? They will just do what is necessary and nothing more. They will not step outside of the bounds of what they perceive their job to be. And then we're told to do your best. Not do okay, not do average, not do decent work, but do your best. That does not require much explanation. And then we're also instructed to work from the heart for your real master, for God. I mean, yes, I have a supervisor, and yes, I may have a manager, and yes, there might be a leadership, and yes, there might be a CEO, and yes, there might be, I don't know, name whoever you want to name. But in the end, there's something that has to happen in our hearts for us to realize that we're working for a greater purpose, for a greater being. In our minds, we can rationalize all day long why a job is good or bad for us, why so and so is not qualified to lead or to manage or to be over our work, right? But when you remove the element of rationalization and of that thought process, then what's left is for us to realize that we are to connect in a completely different way to some of the things that we do, and that only can happen in the heart. Then confident that you'll get paid in full when you come into your inheritance. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't work for free. And the majority of us don't, unless you have volunteered to do something. Chances are you expect to get paid, right? So we're not told that, there's no reward for some of the things that we do. But the phrase that catches my attention is that paid in full, right? There are some things that people here on earth won't recognize you for doing. Good deeds that you may do may go unnoticed, but paid in full tells me that there is someone keeping track of this. Now, if you've decided to from your heart work for God, then rest assured he has payment for some of those things that you do. And then the verse goes on to say, keep in mind always that the ultimate master you're serving is Christ. As simple as that. The sullen servant who does shoddy work will be held responsible, because being a follower of Jesus doesn't cover bad work. And I just love that. So when I talk to you about the likes of, Martha, and when I talk to you about the likes of Sandra and Pamela and Diana, they can differentiate themselves by whether or not they're a follower of Christ and not a follower of Christ. Okay, that's a category. But then just because, in some cases, some of them said that they are follower of Christ, that doesn't remove or that doesn't cover up or compensate for the fact of them doing bad work. So if we are to approach our work in a godly manner, if we are to desire the favor of God in our work, then surely we are to work in ways that he has asked for us to do and approach. And that really, what all that means is that the character with which I approach work is just as important as my, like, what I actually do and the results that I deliver. So then the question remains, what is it that motivates you, right? Because there's work or there's jobs that all the money in the world wouldn't be enough to compensate you to do them, right? And professionalism has to be something that transcends the type of job that you do. So I've talked to you about stories within a childcare setting, and then you may be far removed from any work environment such as that. That doesn't mean that there are some commonalities between the two. Anytime you approach a work situation, then all of us are to examine the character with which we enter our job and our work and how we go about the things that we do, right? And as you go about your work, my prayer for you is this, that the Lord, our God, show his approval and make your efforts successful. May he establish the work of your hands and, yes, make every one of your efforts successful. So, dear professional, you've made it to the very end of this episode. And although you've heard some of the stories about working in a child care center, rest assured that the podcast is not about working in a child care center. However, these are some of the stories that inspired me. And my quest is to look for ways that we can maybe prevent some of them from repeating. And so if you go on this audio journey with me, we'll discover just how we do that. Until next time, bye-bye.